Hi, I'm Sydney, and I am a servant of the Almighty God. In this episode, continuing the series on recognizing God's omnipotence, I want to focus on the keys that we have been granted to keep us and enable us to be the best that we can be. I want to focus especially on the relationship between us and spirituality. See, all religions are based on spirituality. And one of the things we must recognize is when we speak of spirituality, of spirits, of angels, demons, all of these things, there is one thing we must recognize. We have to recognize permanence. Permanence. These things are unlike us, as we have been taught through all these religions, and the words that have been passed down to make us aware is that we are not just of the physical. But it's important that we recognize when it comes to spiritual things, just like the forces of nature, right? Spirituality there is a permanence to it. And the reason that is important is, as I say, and I try to emphasize, is that we all exist in the presence of the living, omnipresent, omnipotent God. And I believe that our civilization, each and every one of us, would be so different if that was emphasized every single time we assemble in our churches, mosques, synagogues, wherever we assemble. Because that simple fact, it will change us. It's just like, as is apparent now, we know, right, that as we go about our daily lives, we are being recorded. And everyone who is aware of being recorded changes their behavior. They reckon, wow, there is a recording of my behavior. And so we tailor, because it's like, okay, if I did something wrong, if I performed some heinous act, this can be brought up and I will stand and witness literally against myself. This should serve to wake us all up if all our religious leaders would emphasize. And I say, when we enter a place of worship where we congregate as a family of people who seek to be more enlightened and follow the teachings, if when we enter, the time is taken to emphasize and ensure that each one of us remember we all exist, not just in some place of worship, as some people want to do now, that when you come into, this is the house of God, or this is his temple, as if he lives there. When we recognize, and this is a big part of what I emphasize in humanity's inflection point, when we recognize that spirituality is everlasting, it's everlasting. We are always in his presence. That changes us. If this was emphasized when we enter and when we are leaving, imagine how things would be different. Because right now, what we see is that almost all religions, it does not seem to really be impactful in every minute, every second of our lives, because it seems very historical. We hear stories of what somebody did a couple of thousand years ago, and people then start thinking, well, when I'm in this place, then I have to be aware of how I carry myself. But if it's emphasized, every second of our lives, every second, because spirituality is permanent. The living God. The demons that are around us, that try to influence, that seek to find weaknesses in our will, so that those who are weak can then be used to perpetrate things that move them further from what we should be. The goodness that's within us, that whatever bonds us to our Creator, that those demons are always the permanence. We have to, and we need to emphasize that. And so this is why I think that we have strayed so far, because just look around. What you see is, and it's so apparent, as in the Christian faith, that lesson of, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. That is such a powerful message. And yet, we see so many Christian faiths, it's all about, literally it translates into greed, because it's about, you live the good life, you do whatever to accumulate, to basically become the rich man. Because we are not being taught. Imagine how our cultures would all be aligned when we recognize that we have one Creator. We have one Creator. And as has been reinforced, it's being reinforced in diversity is His. As servants, we must honor that diversity. Not just based on something that happened 2,000 years ago, but today, and this is why I've come up with these, and it's in my latest book, it's in my other books as well. In this humanity inflection point, I've expanded on this, what I call the Haley manifesto, right? It's basically some simple ways we can remember, because we exist in the presence of the living God. If we just think of H-A-L-I, H for honesty. If we recognize spirituality and the permanence of it, that we exist in the presence of the living God, that the demons around us also have permanence. They were also granted everlasting life. And we have a component that will eventually be among the good and the evil, but we have our own spirituality that is everlasting. And so we would be cognizant that honesty is extremely important. In each and every one of the commandments, honesty is one of the very, very important principles. Not just in ourselves. We are imperfect. No one that I know of can say that I have never told a lie. But when honesty is important, would you follow someone who keeps telling lies, someone that you cannot trust, because what they say is so often a distortion of truth? They take history and they distort it. They take things that happen, right? It's that thing of, don't believe your lying eyes, believe what I say. This is the material that leads to cults. This is what, and we shouldn't allow that. We should not allow ourselves to be led or to be pulled into any group where honesty is not one of the primary ways of interacting. That we should not allow ourselves to follow those who are deceptive, who literally beholden to the demons of deception. We must recognize this. Honesty. Honesty should be one of the bedrock properties that we look for when we associate, because it's something that we want it to be a part of us, that we project, that we are honest. Think about it. When you have friends, people that you can trust, it is so important. You must have honesty. And so, again, going back to the H. Haley, honesty is one of the very, very prominent properties, characteristics that we must look for in ourselves and those with whom we have tight, what I call, as I speak about in my book, Understand, Improve Self and Society. When we consciously construct circles, the people that we bring into our inner circle, we must have honesty. Within ourselves, we should also have we should all be altruistic. Because when we recognize, again, that God is permanent, we are in the presence, we all exist in the presence of the living God. And so it behooves us to be altruistic, not just be greedy and want for ourselves, but we also honor Him by caring for others. Think about how great our world will be, because I believe it's His will, and in time we will have people who recognize, and instead of religion just be about us, this whatever group they are, they would recognize that with the one Creator and we existing in the presence of this living God, we need to care about others. This should extend as stewards of His creations. Think about how much we would be involved in conservation, in protecting, in serving to curtail the greed that just seems to destroy, the demons of deception and greed that seem to pervade, so that we don't, those in power do not care about conservation. It's about exploit until resort, So we would have more people, because religion is it's one of the bases of our entire civilization. But that religion would not only be about getting into a little group and saying, my group is better than this group. We are all part of one group. And that altruism would extend to all people, and all of His creations. So we would see everyone involved, or the majority of us, those who have the spiritual growth, whose spiritual components have developed, involved in conservation, in seeking to get into activities and ensuring sustainability when we are involved, not just exploitation that leads to destruction. It's one of the things we see in, authoritarian systems, where it's like the will of one man. And so it's very easy in those situations for the demons of deception, the demons of greed and hate, to influence one, and this dictator says this is the way it should be. It is why we need to reclaim our will. We need to reclaim our will. And as we reclaim our will, we need to recognize our own spirituality. We need to stop denying or being blinded to the fact that the spirits are permanent, has been and forever will be. And so it's even our mental states. It's very interesting, and I keep bringing this up, that some of our prominent sciences with no empirical value, because I'm all about science, but there are sciences like psychology and psychiatry where there is no empirical value, but they deny anything spiritual. We need to be cognizant, because I believe in time, with science, we will recognize that there are these forces that influence us. that there are spiritual things. And so let me continue with, again, Haley, honesty, altruism, L, love. As we are loved by our Creator, as He has given us the commandments that we should love each other, it is important that even for our mental states, and I believe that there is a spiritual component to that, because as I've said before and I've explained in my books, the ultimate achievement of the spiritual component is service, even unto sacrifice, and that comes from love. When we love something, we will serve them. We will even sacrifice for those and that which we love. And the last one, inclusion. Again, it's all His. We are His creations. So we need to be inclusive of everything. It does not mean that we walk around and everything is going to be wonderful. But these are the challenges. If we use Haley, H-A-L-I, honesty, altruism, love, and inclusion, I believe that even our spiritual component will grow, and a lot of the anxiety and stresses that we face, when we think about it, it really, well, there is no empirical proof right now, but I truly believe it's because we have displaced or we have diminished the recognition of our spiritual component. The spiritual component, again, is the part that cares, that loves, and also makes the connection to that which is beyond us. It's like when we dream. It's like where these inspiration come from. Inspiration that is meant to empower us and uplift us, to enlighten us, to make us more loving, more caring, care about honesty, care about others, altruistic. It also enables us to connect to those great good forces that guide and protect us. And so it's that entire thing of we can lay our burdens down on our Creator and His emissaries, whether we know them as angels or however. But when we recognize our spiritual component, it gives us peace, because we recognize that we also have a permanent part of ourselves, and that is the part that enables us to love and care and grow and connect with other spiritual parts. And this is why I talk about immunizing ourselves from the demons of deception, hate, greed, lust. We grow spiritually if we would embrace those principles, Haley, honesty, altruism, love, inclusion, we can continue even when the world says there are nothing spiritual. But we recognize that the spirits are permanent, and that we have a spiritual component that can contribute. And in time, because I believe in sciences, a lot of this is inspiration. But again, if we think about the internet, think about things we don't see, the ability to take data, right, and create these digital packets and ship them across, wirelessly. This 100 years ago, that would have been magical. The things that are spiritual, I believe in time. We have not invested the resources to detect, to recognize that there are these forces around us. And we see that we have these electrical components that drive, our all these nerves and all this that's within us, that basically enables us to react even thought. All of these things. In time, we will invest the resources that are required, and we will make these discoveries that the spiritual component is alive and has always and will always be there. Our spiritual component can grow and be more in touch. We can become more enlightened. And this brings us to a state of enlightenment and gives us that inner peace and enables us to care and build better bonds with others. I believe in time we will have a network across the world where we can be safe because there are others like us who recognize that right now we all exist in the presence of the living God. And then I can care for you because you are His. And there are many out there who will care for me because they recognize we all exist and we are in His presence. And this is where there is no room for the dishonesty and the hate. And so that is what will uplift us. So each one of us, this is not something about following someone. This is an individual, our choice. It's just like when we do bad things, we are responsible. The good things that we do by growing, by enabling our spiritual component to grow, to care, to love and be of service and even sacrifice for others, enables us to grow and be better. And that ultimately will be reflected from those that we interact with. So these are the keys that have been granted to us. We have the ability today, each one of us. And another very important point, I can remember growing up and, we had, I don't know if you've encountered this, the people who were born again and then they backslide, and you're born again and backslide and they move forward. But when we recognize spirituality, it's permanent. This is one of the reasons why, when we look at, we should not be following individuals and it's almost like trends where they come up with this new rule and this pastor says this, or this cleric or this rabbi says this is what we should do. We should look at the permanent, the commandments that we've been given. The permanence, because these things are based on the spiritual. We should be looking at things that permanence that move us forward. We have been granted these. We don't need to be backsliding because we suddenly have this emotional thing, because emotions can change by the second. I can be very happy now and something happens and immediately I'm mad. But when we are guided by principles, the principles based on the spiritual component, the principles are like the spirits, they are everlasting. When we are guided by good principles, we can grow and we can become better. And when we embody these, they can be reflected, and this is how we will get ultimately to humanity's inflection point, when the religions recognize that all knowledge comes from God, and science, the knowledge from God. And now I say that what we call nature is basically the manifestation of God's omnipotence. All the beautiful things we see in nature, the manifestation of God's omnipotence. When religions recognize the universality of that and how it brings science, medicine, brings us all together. It does not discriminate. This is what is required. These are the principles that will eventually get religions turned around. But it starts with us, each and every one of us having those keys, recognizing the permanence and the immediacy of the spiritual. It's always there within us. And so we seek to grow and ultimately grow large communities across the world. Across the world, yes, across the world. From every corner of the world, we can build brothers and sisters who recognize and who have grown spiritually, who are so enlightened, who have accepted the keys that will move us to a better and much more prosperous and synergistic world where we care, we have honesty is one of the keys that we share, and we have the altruism, love and inclusion for all our brothers and sisters across this world. I want to remind you, this is not a coincidence that you are viewing this. It's a series of decisions that you made at some point that led you to this, and I hope it's an inspiration for you going forward. In time, we will have that community where each and every one of us recognize the key to meeting God's expectation of us is self-control, not controlling anyone else. That's where each one of us can embody Haley: honesty, altruism, love, and inclusion. I want to thank you for taking the time to view this, and until next time, may God bless us all. Thank you.